Keep the dollar, the billionaire said without looking up. That's exactly what your service was worth. The words floated across the candlelit dining room with the quiet confidence only someone accustomed to being obeyed could possess. Conversations faded. Crystal glasses paused halfway to waiting lips. Even the soft jazz drifting from the grand piano seemed to hesitate for a heartbeat inside the Hawthorne Room, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants where reservations disappeared months in advance, and every table carried the scent of old money. Sitting beside the untouched dessert menu was a leather check presenter holding a bill totaling $3,214.78. Tucked neatly inside rested a single $1 bill. Nothing more. No handwritten note. No smile. No explanation. Just one lonely dollar lying against thousands spent, as if it were the punchline to a private joke. Every server nearby noticed it. So did the bartender polishing crystal behind the marble counter. A young couple celebrating an anniversary exchanged uneasy glances. The restaurant manager discreetly slowed his pace, pretending to inspect the wine display while secretly watching table 12. Because everyone knew who occupied that seat. Ethan Caldwell, 40 years old, founder of Caldwell Capital, billionaire, widowed by circumstance, hardened by disappointment, and known throughout the business world as a man who trusted balance sheets more than promises. Beside him sat his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, quietly sketching flowers on the back of a folded kids' menu with colored pencils she carried everywhere. Unlike her father, she smiled easily. Unlike her father, she still believed strangers usually meant well. Approaching the table with careful steps was Naomi Brooks, a 25-year-old black waitress whose calm voice rarely rose above the restaurant's music. She had worked double shifts for nearly 3 years, never arriving late, never leaving before every chair was perfectly aligned beneath every polished table. Most guests barely remembered her face, yet nearly all remembered how peacefully she made an evening feel. She thanked people before they thanked her. She listened more than she spoke. Some co-workers mistook her silence for insecurity. Others assumed she simply lacked confidence. None of them knew silence had become her strength long before she ever carried her first serving tray. Tonight, every eye followed her as she reached the leather folder. Her fingers rested lightly on its edge before she opened it. She looked at the receipt. She saw the single dollar. She didn't blink. She didn't sigh. She didn't search the room for sympathy. Instead, she slowly lifted the bill between 2 fingers, glanced toward Ethan, then toward little Lily, whose innocent eyes met hers with quiet curiosity. Ethan leaned back comfortably, convinced the next few seconds would reveal everything he wanted to know. He had performed versions of this little experiment before. Some servers complained. Some forced smiles they couldn't hide. Some chased him into the lobby, demanding an explanation. Money, he believed, stripped away masks faster than truth ever could. But as Naomi gently folded the dollar once, smoothing its edges with remarkable care, something unexpectedly peaceful crossed her face. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger. It looked almost like gratitude. And in that single impossible moment, before she even spoke a single word, Ethan Caldwell felt the certainty he had carried into the restaurant begin to crack in ways no business negotiation ever had. Naomi slowly placed the folded dollar back inside the leather check presenter instead of slipping it into her apron. Then she looked at Lily first, offering the little girl the same warm smile she offered every guest who walked through the restaurant doors. "Did you enjoy the chocolate souffle?" she asked gently. Lily nodded with bright eyes. "It was the best one I have ever had." Naomi smiled a little wider. "I am glad. The pastry chef starts making those before sunrise every morning. He says desserts should give people one happy memory to take home." Lily glanced at her father, expecting him to speak, but Ethan remained silent, carefully studying every movement Naomi made. There was no disappointment on her face, no forced politeness hiding resentment. She simply carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already made peace with things other people could not understand. She reached into the small pocket sewn inside her apron and carefully pulled out another crisp $1 bill of her own. Without hesitation, she placed it beside Ethan's dollar, closed the folder, and gently slid it back across the white tablecloth. The tiny movement puzzled everyone watching. Even the manager standing across the dining room frowned in confusion. Ethan finally looked up. "What is this?" he asked calmly. Naomi answered with the same composed voice that never seemed to compete with the noise around her. Now your daughter has $2 lucky instead of one. Ethan blinked. Lucky dollars? Naomi nodded. My father used to keep one in his wallet every day of his life. He always said that $1 could remind a person of something money could never buy. Lily tilted her head. What was that? Naomi looked directly at the little girl. Character. The word landed softly, but somehow it echoed louder than the conversations filling the elegant restaurant. Lily smiled as though she had just learned a secret. Ethan did not. He remained perfectly still, searching Naomi's expression for sarcasm or hidden judgment. He found neither. There was only sincerity, the kind that could not be rehearsed. As Naomi quietly excused herself to serve another table, several guests continued watching her weave gracefully through the dining room. She treated every customer exactly the same. The elderly couple celebrating 50 years of marriage received the same gentle attention as the technology executives discussing mergers over expensive wine. The family with noisy children received the same patient smile as the famous attorney dining alone in the corner booth. There were no favorites, no calculations, no performance. It was simply who she was. Ethan had built an empire by assuming every decision had a motive hidden beneath the surface. Every partnership contained conditions. Every kindness expected repayment. Years in boardrooms had trained him to search for leverage before trust. Yet the young woman walking between polished tables seemed untouched by that philosophy. She moved with purpose, but never with urgency. She listened before answering. She thanked people before they thanked her. Watching her became strangely unsettling because nothing fit the conclusion he had expected when he slipped that single dollar into the check presenter. Across the table, Lily quietly picked up both $1 bills, held them together, and whispered almost to herself, Daddy, I think she gave us something instead of taking something. Ethan looked at the two small bills resting in his daughter's hands, and for reasons he could not explain, they suddenly felt heavier than the $3,000 he had spent on dinner. For the first time that evening, Ethan Caldwell left his coffee untouched. The rich aroma rising from the porcelain cup disappeared into the background as his attention followed Naomi across the dining room. She was already helping another table, answering questions about the evening specials with the same quiet warmth she had shown his family only moments earlier. There was no lingering glance in his direction, no expectation that he would apologize, no attempt to make him feel guilty. She had simply moved on. That unsettled him more than any confrontation ever could. Most people reacted to tests. Some failed loudly. Others passed carefully. Naomi had done something entirely different. She had ignored the test itself and responded only to the people involved. Ethan leaned back slowly, folding his hands together while Lily continued tracing flowers with her colored pencils. The little girl looked up. Daddy, why did you only leave $1? The innocent question landed with a weight no board meeting had ever carried. Ethan hesitated before answering. Sometimes people show who they really are when they think nobody important is watching. Lily frowned slightly. But she knew you were watching. Ethan almost smiled. Yes, I suppose she did. Lily lowered her voice. Then maybe she was hoping you would show who you really are too. Her words caught him completely off guard. Children often spoke without strategy, without filters, without calculating consequences. That was exactly why their honesty could feel impossible to escape. Ethan glanced toward Naomi once more. She knelt beside an elderly gentleman whose hands trembled slightly as he tried to unfold his napkin. Without drawing attention from anyone else, she gently adjusted the place setting, smiled, and stepped away before the man even had the chance to thank her. A few minutes later, she noticed another guest quietly searching beneath the table for a dropped hearing aid battery. She found it within seconds and returned it with the same calm expression she wore while carrying water glasses or clearing empty plates. None of those moments earned applause. No one recorded them with a phone. They were acts too ordinary for headlines, yet somehow too extraordinary to ignore. Ethan had spent years believing that character revealed itself only under pressure. He built interview processes around impossible questions. He watched candidates when they thought meetings were over. He trusted surprise more than polished answers. His entire business philosophy rested on one belief. Every person had a price. Every smile had conditions. Every kindness came with an invoice waiting to be delivered later. Yet the woman moving quietly through the Hawthorne room seemed untouched by that rule. She behaved the same whether someone ordered sparkling water or an expensive bottle of vintage wine, whether the guest wore a custom-tailored suit or a delivery uniform, whether the tip was generous or almost non-existent. Ethan found himself searching for flaws simply because consistency, like hers, felt unrealistic. Across the room, the restaurant manager approached Naomi and quietly whispered something. She nodded, then disappeared briefly through the swinging kitchen doors before returning with a neatly wrapped slice of cheesecake placed inside an elegant white box. She walked directly to Lily and handed it to her with a gentle smile. "Our pastry chef heard this is your favorite. He wanted you to have one for tomorrow after school." Lily's face lit up. "Really?" Naomi nodded. "He says desserts taste even better when there is something to look forward to." Ethan reached instinctively for his wallet. "Please let me pay for it." Naomi softly shook her head. "It has already been taken care of." Ethan looked confused. "By whom?" Naomi smiled with quiet sincerity. "Someone who believes every child deserves a reason to smile tomorrow too." As she walked away once again, Ethan realized she had answered his question without revealing a single name, and somehow that mystery lingered far longer than the $1 ever could. The dinner should have ended there, but some evenings refuse to follow the plans people make for them. Lily carefully held the small white dessert box against her chest as Ethan signed the receipt without another word. Around them, the restaurant slowly settled back into its familiar rhythm. Silverware chimed softly against porcelain. Low conversations returned. The pianist eased into another gentle melody. Yet something invisible had shifted at table 12. Before Ethan could stand, Lily tugged lightly on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I say thank you?" He looked at his daughter, then toward Naomi, who was arranging fresh glasses at a nearby service station. "Of course," he replied. Lily hurried across the dining room with the fearless confidence only children possess. Naomi looked up just as the little girl stopped in front of her. "Thank you for the cheesecake," Lily said. "And thank you for telling me about the lucky dollar." Naomi knelt until they were eye level. "You are very welcome." Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the two folded $1 bills. "Can I keep both?" Naomi smiled warmly. "Only if you promise never to forget why you have them." Lily nodded immediately. "I promise." "Then they are yours." Ethan watched the exchange from several feet away, unable to explain why such a simple conversation felt more valuable than many business negotiations he had attended over the years. There was no performance, no attempt to impress. Naomi spoke to Lily exactly as she would have spoken if nobody else had been watching. That consistency disturbed every assumption Ethan had carried for years. As Lily skipped back toward him, she suddenly stopped halfway and turned around again. "Miss Naomi," she called. Naomi looked up. "Yes." Lily hesitated for a second before asking, "If someone gives you almost nothing, why do you still treat them kindly?" Several nearby guests unconsciously looked in their direction. Even the restaurant manager paused while reviewing reservations on a tablet. Naomi considered the question carefully before answering. "Because kindness loses its meaning if it depends on what someone gives me in return." The words were spoken gently, almost like a conversation between friends, yet they seemed to settle over the dining room like fresh snow. Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer only a child could completely understand. Ethan, however, remained silent. He had spent years rewarding performance and measuring value through results. Every investment had expected returns. Every decision had calculations behind it. Listening to Naomi, he realized she operated under an entirely different equation. As father and daughter walked toward the entrance beneath the glowing chandeliers, Ethan glanced back one final time. Naomi had already returned to work, greeting a newly seated family with the same welcoming smile she had offered everyone else that evening. She had not followed him to the door. She had not waited for gratitude. She had not even looked in his direction again. It was as though the entire encounter had already become part of the past for her. Outside, the cool Chicago night wrapped the city in reflections of amber streetlights shimmering across rain-polished sidewalks. Ethan opened the passenger door for Lily before walking around to the driver's side of the car. Just as he reached for the handle, Lily quietly asked, "Daddy, were you testing her tonight?" Ethan froze for a brief moment before answering honestly, "Yes." Lily looked down at the two folded dollars resting safely inside her small hands. "Then I think somebody else passed the test." Ethan looked through the restaurant window one last time. Inside, Naomi laughed softly with an elderly guest who had forgotten his reading glasses. She looked exactly the same as when the evening had begun, but somehow nothing looked the same anymore. The drive home was unusually quiet. Chicago's skyline shimmered across the windshield while Lily rested the small dessert box on her lap as though it contained something far more valuable than cheesecake. The two folded $1 bills remained tucked safely inside her jacket pocket, and every few minutes she reached down to make sure they were still there. Ethan noticed the gesture, but said nothing. His thoughts remained fixed on the young waitress whose calm response refused to leave his mind. By the time they reached home, the grandfather clock in the foyer had already chimed 10. Lily slipped off her shoes, hugged her father goodnight, then paused halfway up the staircase. "Daddy," she called softly. Ethan looked up from placing his keys on the entry table. "Yes." She smiled. "Do not forget your lucky dollar." Before he could answer, she disappeared upstairs. Ethan stood alone in the silence of the house, realizing the folded bill was still resting inside the pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled it out and unfolded it carefully beneath the kitchen lights. It was only $1. Crisp. Ordinary. Yet somehow it felt different now. He remembered the certainty with which he had walked into the restaurant, believing that every person eventually revealed hidden motives. Tonight, for the first time in years, someone had challenged that belief without arguing, without accusing him, and without even trying to change his mind. The next morning, his office overlooked the city already rushing toward another busy day. Executives filled the conference room for the weekly leadership meeting. Charts appeared on large screens. Revenue forecasts were discussed. Acquisitions were debated. Ethan listened, but his concentration wandered whenever his fingers brushed the folded dollar inside his jacket pocket. During a short break, his longtime chief operating officer, Daniel Mercer, noticed his distraction. "You seem unusually quiet today," Daniel said. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Have you ever met someone who completely ignored the game you expected them to play?" Daniel laughed. "Only a few times. Those people are usually the hardest to forget." Ethan looked through the glass wall toward the city below. "I think I met one last night." He almost left the conversation there, but curiosity slowly replaced certainty. Before the meeting resumed, he quietly asked his executive assistant to gather information about the Hawthorne Room. Not financial reports, not ownership records. He wanted to know about employee retention, customer satisfaction, and particularly one server named Naomi Brooks. The request surprised everyone because Ethan rarely asked questions driven by personal curiosity. Late that afternoon, a thin folder appeared on his desk. It contained only basic employment information. Naomi had worked at the restaurant for nearly 3 years. She had never received a formal complaint. She had accepted extra shifts whenever co-workers faced family emergencies. She had quietly declined 2 management promotions because the evening schedule allowed her to help care for her younger brother while he attended college. There were no dramatic headlines, no extraordinary achievements, just page after page describing consistent reliability and quiet generosity. Ethan closed the folder slowly. Numbers had always helped him understand people. This time the numbers only deepened the mystery. That evening, as the city lights returned outside his office windows, he slipped the folded dollar back into his wallet beside his credit cards. For reasons he could not fully explain, he made a decision he had never imagined making 24 hours earlier. He would return to the Hawthorne Room, not to conduct another test, not to prove himself right. This time he wanted to discover whether genuine character could really remain unchanged when nobody believed they were still being watched. 2 evenings later, Ethan returned without the tailored suit that usually announced his arrival before he spoke a single word. He wore a simple navy sweater, dark jeans, and an ordinary watch, leaving behind every visible symbol that usually caused restaurant staff to recognize him within seconds. Lily walked beside him carrying the 2 folded $1 bills inside a small leather pouch she now treated like a treasured keepsake. As they stepped through the familiar entrance of the Hawthorne Room, nothing about the evening suggested anyone expected something extraordinary to happen. The pianist welcomed. Another busy dinner service with gentle melodies. Fresh flowers decorated each table. Warm light reflected across polished glass and brushed brass. Naomi greeted another family near the entrance before noticing Ethan and Lily waiting quietly for the host. There was no surprise on her face, no hesitation, and no sign that she viewed them differently because of what had happened during their previous visit. She simply smiled with the same calm warmth she offered every guest. "Welcome back," she said. "It is nice to see both of you again." There was no mention of the $1 tip, no reminder of the uncomfortable moment. She allowed the past to remain exactly where it belonged. Lily smiled immediately. "I still have the lucky dollars." Naomi laughed softly. "I had a feeling you would." As they were seated, Ethan watched carefully, almost hoping to discover some hidden change in her behavior. Instead, he noticed something else. Naomi treated every table with exactly the same quiet respect. She patiently explained menu options to an elderly couple celebrating a birthday. She helped a young father choose a meal that would be safe for his son who had food allergies. She congratulated a college graduate surrounded by proud relatives without making the celebration about herself. Every conversation was brief, sincere, and focused entirely on the people sitting before her. Nothing appeared rehearsed. Nothing seemed calculated. Midway through dinner, Lily excused herself to wash her hands. While Ethan waited alone, he noticed Naomi carrying a fresh basket of warm bread toward another table. A teenage busser accidentally bumped the corner of the tray, sending several rolls onto the floor. The young employee froze in embarrassment, clearly expecting criticism. Instead, Naomi quietly smiled, placed the remaining basket on a nearby service station, and said, "Accidents happen. Let us fix it together before the bread gets cold." Within moments, the situation disappeared without a single raised voice or frustrated expression. The busser thanked her with visible relief before hurrying back to work. Ethan watched the exchange more carefully than he had watched million-dollar negotiations. Nobody outside the immediate area even realized a mistake had occurred. When Lily returned, she whispered, "Daddy." She made him feel better instead of making him feel bad. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, she did." A few minutes later, Naomi stopped by their table to refill water glasses. Ethan finally asked the question that had lingered in his mind since their first meeting. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi nodded. "Of course." Ethan looked at her with genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. "How do you stay so patient with everyone?" Naomi considered the question before answering. "My father used to tell me that every person carries something invisible. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is simply a difficult day. If I only respond to what I see, I might miss who they really are." Ethan lowered his eyes toward the folded dollar resting inside his wallet. For the second time in his life, a single sentence left him with no argument at all, only the quiet realization that perhaps the greatest test had never been about generosity, but about whether he had been willing to see another human being beyond the assumptions he carried into the room. The question lingered in Ethan's mind long after Naomi stepped away to help another table. Every successful company he had built rested on systems, measurements, and performance reviews. Every promotion required proof. Every investment demanded evidence. Yet the quiet wisdom she carried could not be measured on a spreadsheet or summarized in an annual report. It simply appeared in ordinary moments that most people never noticed. Lily stirred the ice in her lemonade before looking up at her father with a thoughtful smile. "Daddy, do you think Miss Naomi knew you were trying to figure her out?" Ethan let out a slow breath. "I think she knew." Lily tilted her head. "Then why did she never get upset?" Ethan looked across the dining room, where Naomi was patiently helping a couple celebrate their anniversary. "I do not think she was trying to win anything." Those words surprised even him. They sounded less like an observation and more like a confession. Dinner came to a gentle close, but before Ethan asked for the check, he noticed the restaurant owner greeting guests near the entrance. The older gentleman eventually stopped by their table and welcomed Ethan back. During the conversation, Ethan casually asked, "How long has Naomi worked here?" The owner smiled immediately. "Long enough to change this place." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The owner glanced toward Naomi with unmistakable respect. 3 years ago, we had a difficult winter. Business slowed down. Several employees were worried about paying rent. Without telling anyone, Naomi started trading shifts so coworkers with children could attend school events or doctor appointments. She never asked for recognition. Half the staff did not even realize she was giving up her own evenings until months later. Ethan listened without interrupting. The owner continued. "Last Thanksgiving, one of our dishwashers lost his apartment after unexpected medical bills. Naomi organized a quiet collection among the staff. She contributed the largest amount herself, then made everyone promise never to tell him where the money came from. She said accepting kindness is easier when pride stays intact. Ethan slowly looked toward Naomi again. She was laughing softly with an elderly woman while carefully wrapping leftovers to take home. Nothing about her suggested someone waiting to be admired. She behaved exactly as she had from the beginning. The owner smiled knowingly. People often assume leadership belongs to whoever has the biggest office. Around here, leadership usually carries a serving tray. Those words settled deeply inside Ethan. For years, he had believed influence flowed downward from titles and wealth. Tonight, he was watching influence spread quietly through patience, humility, and consistency. Before leaving, Lily walked over to Naomi once again. She carefully removed one of the folded dollars from her leather pouch and held it out. "I think you should keep one now," she said. Naomi looked at the little bill before gently closing Lily's small hand around it again. "No," she answered kindly. "It belongs with you." Lily looked confused. "Why?" Naomi smiled. "Because someday you will meet someone who needs that reminder more than I do." Ethan heard every word. In that instant, he understood something he had missed during countless business deals. Naomi had never treated the dollar as money. She had treated it as a message. While he had been trying to measure another person's character, she had quietly been planting a lesson inside his daughter's heart. And standing there beneath the warm lights of the Hawthorne room, Ethan realized that the person who had truly been tested from the very beginning had never been the waitress at all. It had been the billionaire who believed everything valuable could be measured before it could be understood. When Ethan and Lily stepped outside into the cool evening air, neither of them spoke for several moments. The city moved around them with its usual rhythm. Traffic lights changed. Taxi cabs rolled past. People hurried along the sidewalks carrying shopping bags and coffee cups, each wrapped inside lives invisible to everyone else. Ethan unlocked the car, but did not open the door. Instead, he stood quietly with one hand resting on the roof, looking back through the restaurant window where Naomi continued serving guests as though nothing remarkable had happened that night. She had no idea that a conversation lasting only a few minutes had quietly dismantled beliefs he had spent decades building. Lily gently slipped her hand into his. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes." "You look sad." Ethan smiled faintly. "Not sad. Just thinking." Lily looked toward the glowing restaurant. "About Miss Naomi?" He nodded. "About myself." Those words surprised him as much as they surprised his daughter. All his life, he had believed strength meant never questioning his own judgment. Yet standing beneath the Chicago skyline, he realized real strength might begin the moment someone became willing to admit they had been wrong. The following Monday morning, Ethan canceled 2 meetings that had been scheduled for weeks. His executive team stared in disbelief when he walked into the boardroom carrying no presentation, no financial reports, and no acquisition proposals. Instead, he placed a single folded $1 bill in the center of the polished conference table. Every executive looked at it in confusion. Daniel Mercer finally asked, "Is this related to the restaurant you mentioned?" Ethan nodded. "Yes." The room remained silent. "For years," Ethan began, "I believed I could evaluate character by putting people under pressure. I thought difficult situations exposed who they truly were. I was wrong." Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. Ethan continued calmly. "Pressure does reveal character, but it also reveals our own." No one interrupted. "Last week I met someone with no impressive title, no corner office, and no authority over anyone in this room. Yet she demonstrated leadership more clearly than many executives I have hired." Daniel leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "What made her different?" Ethan looked around the room before answering. "She treated every person with the same dignity, regardless of what they could give her in return. She never changed because the circumstances changed." The room fell completely still. Ethan had delivered hundreds of speeches about profits, innovation, and market strategy, but never one about humility. Before ending the meeting, he announced a new leadership initiative across Caldwell Capital. Beginning immediately, executive performance reviews would include mentorship, respect shown toward employees at every level, and contributions to workplace culture alongside financial results. Success would no longer be measured only by numbers. It would also be measured by the way people helped others grow. Some executives looked surprised. Others slowly nodded in agreement. Daniel smiled quietly. recognizing that the decision had not been created in a conference room, but in a restaurant where a simple act of grace had accomplished what years of corporate seminars never could. Later that afternoon, Ethan placed one of the folded dollars inside a small frame on the bookshelf behind his desk. Beneath it, he inserted a handwritten note containing only one sentence. Noticed the awards hanging on the walls, and Ethan hoped they always would. 1 year later, the framed $1 bill remained in the exact same place behind Ethan Caldwell's desk, but almost everything else about his company had changed. Visitors still admired the skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, yet they often found their attention drifting toward the simple frame resting quietly beside awards worth millions of dollars. Some executives asked about it during meetings. New employees noticed it during interviews. Ethan answered every question the same way. It reminds me that the smallest lesson can create the greatest change. Inside Caldwell Capital, promotion conversations no longer centered only on quarterly profits or impressive presentations. Managers were expected to mentor young employees, listen before making decisions, and treat every person with equal respect, whether they worked in the boardroom or greeted guests at the front desk. Asked if he could speak with her for just a moment. She nodded politely. He reached into his wallet and carefully removed the second folded $1 bill, placing it on the table between them. "I think this belongs with you now," he said softly.